This is the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Kendle of the notaballerina.com travel blog. Every episode I'll share travel tales from several fellow travel lovers, and together we hope to entertain and inspire you, remind you of some of your own great travel experiences, and encourage you to hit the road again soon. Hello, and welcome to episode 90 of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. And it's a very, very special episode because it's 2 years since I launched the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. That happened on my 40th birthday back in March 2016. So yes, I guess that makes me now 42, which is a little bit depressing, but still. I'm very happy, very, very, very happy, in fact, to have been recording the Thoughtful Travel Podcast for 2 years so far. It is one of the very, very most fun things I do. I smile while I'm recording it because it's so much fun. I get to meet all kinds of cool people who agree to be interviewed by me and come on the podcast. I have my wonderful group of people on Facebook, the Thoughtful Travellers group, who are such like-minded, lovely people, and always a joy to go in that group and have a chat with them. And there are just countless good things about running this podcast. So I decided to do something a little bit different for this 2-year anniversary episode. And it's a bit of a turn the tables kind of episode because I realised that I'm always the one asking the questions and I, get to tell a few of my own tales. But this time I asked in the Facebook group for any questions that people wanted to ask me. And we got lots and lots and lots of really good questions. And I then needed to find someone to interview me because I can't just interview myself. That would sound odd, right? And I thought of my lovely friend, Kristy Morton. She's always been a great support to me in all of my crazy endeavours. She's a bit like me and has lots of different ideas and lots of things to do. And I especially loved that kind of full circle thing that Kristy was one of my first guests. Well, in fact, she was the very first person I interviewed and recorded because we're good enough friends that I could say, I'm not sure if I know how to do this whole recording thing. Can I try with you, please? And she was lovely enough to say yes. And then some of that chat appeared in episode 1 of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. So I was very excited when Kristy agreed to interview me. So big thank you to everyone who submitted questions, and big thank you to Kristy for giving up her precious free time to interview me on my own podcast. So I'll play that interview in just a minute. But before then, as well as thanking you all for being such wonderful listeners over the last 2 years, I wonder if you feel inclined to give the podcast a 2-year birthday present, or me a 42-year birthday present, and help me share the Thoughtful Travel Podcast with a wider audience. So there's a few ways that you could help out with that. One is if you could leave a review on the podcasts app, or iTunes if you are listening to it that way, or if you could share maybe your favourite episode or just the podcast in general, tell a travel loving friend about it, post it on your social media, on your Facebook profile, anything like that would be amazing, and I would be extraordinarily grateful. I love having new people find the podcast all the time. I get beautiful messages from people who've just discovered it. I always remember one, and I can't remember who it was, but I remember they said they were listening to the podcast when they were walking their dog, and they were catching up on all the episodes because they just discovered it. And they walked I think it was quite a large dog, walked their dog twice a day, and they were about to run out of episodes. So what was the dog going to do if they couldn't walk twice a day? Could I make some more episodes, please? And I love getting messages like that. And I love getting messages from people saying that they've been inspired to travel again, or, just enjoyed reliving some of their travel moments by hearing the kind of things we talk about here on the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. So anyway, yes, if you feel so inclined to celebrate this birthday and anniversary with me, then the best possible way would be to share this podcast more widely. So thank you in advance. So without further ado, as they say, let me stop talking, and I will continue talking in my chat that I had with Kristy with all the wonderful questions from the Thoughtful Travellers Facebook group members.
Hi Amanda, I'm so looking forward to turning the tables on you for a change. So let's get stuck into the questions. Jessica wants to know, did you own a car when you decided to take your first long-term trip? Did you sell it or store it? Did you have feelings about coming back to Australia and not having possessions waiting for you?
Well, this is a cool question, and I had to cast my mind back a fair bit because it was like 2001 when I first left Australia for a long-term trip. So I was, I think, 25. I'm not sure, my maths is sometimes dodgy on that, but it was to take off to live in Japan, and we actually had a contract to live in Japan for a year. It was with my boyfriend at the time, and I really didn't actually know what was going to happen after that. And looking back, I'm surprised that I was so, I don't know, just kind of reckless at getting rid of things. But I guess I was 25, it didn't matter. So I did have a car and I did sell it. And sold off like most of our furniture, and we had a big garage sale, and we kept, too many boxes of things, books and, I don't know, just life paraphernalia. And I think they ended up spread across my family's garages and stuff. I don't really remember where, it's too long ago to remember clearly. But what I do know is I was so keen to leave Australia for a while that I really didn't care if I had nothing to come back to. And I don't know, I wouldn't really feel like this now, but at the time, I just wanted to go, and I didn't really give too much thought to what possessions I would have waiting here when I came back. And even though we actually really were only committed to go for a year, and we were just going to then see what happened. I mean, we really could have come back after just a year, but we didn't. I was away for like 5.5, nearly 6 years in the end. So, I don't know. I was just young and reckless, maybe, is the short answer to that question.
I think when you go on a holiday and come back, though, you do realise your possessions probably don't matter as much as you thought they did before you left.
That's very, very true. And certainly when I unpacked those boxes, I did have a lot of, why the heck did I keep this? To lots of those things. Yep.
Excellent. Next we have Rosalind with, her question is, if you could travel indefinitely, where would you go? How would you travel? Assuming a modest budget.
I like that she assumes a modest budget, because that's definitely going to be me.
I like that too.
This is not an unrealistic kind of if you win the lottery and you can travel forever question. So I have lots of thoughts about this, because I feel like, down the track, I would like to kind of travel indefinitely for a while. So I've given it quite some thought over the time, and I could imagine doing a combination of house sitting, because I think house sitting is a really cool way to be able to see different places, really cheaply, kind of free rent and stuff, or maybe rent apartments and stuff, and just do really like slow travel kind of approach, so that, stay somewhere for, a month or 3 months, or, however long I can, move on. And to the question of where, honestly, basically anywhere. Like, if I'm just kind of, I know
You're
it
not
sounds,
fussy.
I'm really not fussy. If I'm just wandering the world, then I would just, I don't know. I mean, I used to kind of play this game in my head when I was teaching overseas, and I was looking at the job boards for where future jobs could be. And I would just see where the jobs came up and think, oh, well, yeah, that'd be interesting. I remember at one stage, when was it? I don't even remember exactly where I was at the time, but I looked at the job boards, and I remember very clearly seeing there was a job in Morocco and a job in Moscow, and I thought both of those sound equally wonderful. I could go either of those places. And yeah, I don't know. I think I'm just not fussy at all. I mean, I'm not great with cold weather, so I could probably safely say I would usually tend to warmer places, or some places during summer. But yeah, otherwise really anywhere. I would love to travel indefinitely. So watch this space.
That would be fantastic.
It would be good. I've got 10 years until my son finishes school. I'm not counting, but...
No, I was going to say, that's pretty quick response. Great. And next we have Leslie, who wants to know, what are the great landmarks of the world you want to visit, and how many have you visited?
Yes. Now, this is a good question, because I like to think that I'm not a very touristy kind of traveller who kind of checks off seeing the landmarks, but I do like seeing the landmarks. So
yes,
I'm not someone who can actually go to Paris and not go to the Eiffel Tower. Like, yes. It's famous. All these places are famous for a reason, and you read about them and see them on movies. And I don't know. I just want to kind of be part of that if it's nearby. So I don't know how many I have visited, but I would say that when I get the chance, I usually do. Like, I don't skip them. You know, I've been to the Eiffel Tower several times. In fact, each time I've been to Paris, I've always gone back to the Eiffel Tower. You know, I've been to the Statue of Liberty in New York. I've seen the Berlin Wall or what's left of it, and Big Ben in London. So I go to lots of those kind of landmarks. And I'm not really ashamed to say that I like them, because it's exciting and it's fun. So, I mean, it's not all I do in a place, you know, by a long shot, but I enjoy it.
Yes.
But
you don't go there specifically for that, but you're happy to see the sights when you're there.
That's exactly right. Yes. Well summarised. Thank you, Kristy. And the only one I could think of as the one I want to visit is not really me. It's actually my son. He's quite obsessed with seeing the Taj Mahal. And because we've talked about it a lot, and, you know, then we'll read books about it and, you know, look at videos and stuff. Now I really want to go too. So although I'm not really super keen on visiting India, I would like to take him to see the Taj Mahal. So that's the one I would like to visit. Other than that, I don't really have any kind of big must-sees. I'll just see what's around when I'm, you know, wandering the world.
Yes. Wow, that's pretty cool. I'm sure you guys will get there.
One day.
Next up, we have Ben, who has asked, have you picked up any habits, items or customs from the other countries you've visited and continue to use them in your everyday life?
I love this question. Now, firstly, my most common things were food related, so I'll leave them till last, because I just realised there's something else that we do on an everyday basis, and that's when I say goodnight to my son. I say goodnight to him in a few different languages, and they're languages that we've kind of picked up along the way. Like, I say it in German, and then in Icelandic, because we loved our trip to Iceland, and in like Irish, because we had a beautiful stay, a longer stay in Ireland a few years ago with a good friend of mine. So that's one thing that comes into our everyday life. And
that's
then
very cool.
It is very cool. It's very, it's just a habit that's stuck. And the other thing I do is, when I left Australia, before I travelled long term, I didn't drink tea or coffee. I still don't drink coffee, but I now obsessively drink green tea, and that absolutely was a habit I adopted while I lived in Japan. Because it was just offered to me so often, and I had to be polite to drink, because you have to be polite in Japan because they're so polite. And so it kind of got me addicted to green tea, and plus it's, you know, apparently very healthy, so it's a good addiction. And fruit tea, when I lived in Slovakia, I had a beautiful friend, Zitka, who lived across from me in an apartment just across the road. And on the weekend, we would often get together, and she would make me these amazing fruit teas. And I kind of got addicted to fruit tea as well. So, you know, that's kind of everyday things that I do. I always start the day with my green tea, and it does make me think of life in Japan very, very often. And, the afternoon often includes my fruit tea, which is my habit from Slovakia. So, yeah. It's
very nice.
Makes me feel happy.
That's good. And next we have Jules, who wants to know, what is your favourite article of travel clothing? A travel book you most wish you have lived through, and what's your favourite travel childhood memory?
Yes, lots of questions here. But
yes, so it's actually 3, sorry.
It's 3 in 1, but it's okay, because I have some quick answers for it. I've been thinking about this. So travel clothing, I don't obsessively have lots of, you know, those, I don't know what the right term is,
Thermals?
Professional travel clothes. Oh, yeah, them too. Or, you know, those like travel clothes with 27 pockets or anything. I don't really have anything special. But I do love to have a good pair of shoes. You know, I like to walk a lot when I travel. Yes. So I don't know, many years ago I started buying North Face shoes, and they seem to fit my kind of feel of what a traveller should be like, and I keep buying them. So they are not sponsoring this, but I do keep buying them. Now, the travel book I most wished I had lived through is an easy pick. So Paul Theroux wrote a book, I think almost before I was born, called The Great Railway Bazaar, and it's about his train trip, I think like 3 or 4 months long, you know, across the Middle East, all through Asia, and then back across the Trans-Siberian. And I read that book, I don't know, probably as a teenager, I think, and that inspired me to really, really long to take that Trans-Siberian train, which I did. But I haven't had a chance to explore much of the rest of the places he's been. So I would love to do that trip, recreate his trip at some stage. And now the final question from Jules, because there was a lot, was favourite travel childhood memory, right? And it was funny because I was thinking about when I went to Europe. So I was really lucky as a kid. My parents took us camper vanning around Europe for 6 months. And so it was a super budget trip, just staying in caravan parks and stuff. And it's really weird if I can remember lots of different parts of it. But if I think about like the really favourite happy times, they're the kind of little everyday things that were different because they were a different country, but also sort of the same as home. Like I specifically remember we were staying in Frankfurt with some friends, and there was a playground nearby that had this awesome, huge flying fox. It was just this enormous, grab it at one end and fly right down to the other end. I remember that because I'd never seen one like that before. And I remember we stayed with other friends in London. Well, actually, we stayed in their house and they weren't there. And there was these squirrels that came up to the back door. And, I'd never got to see squirrels. We have other animals down here, but certainly no squirrels running around. So it's weird, but those are the kind of things that really, really stuck out in my memory. So the everyday life. Weird, hey?
Yeah, but what an awesome trip to do.
Oh, it was an awesome trip. Absolutely. I was so lucky. It completely changed my life.
Yeah, that's excellent. Next up we have Jeff, and he's asked, have you ever met someone you know completely by chance while on a journey far from home? As in, you were sitting in a park in San Francisco and suddenly heard someone yelling your name, as happened to me.
Yes. Now, I'm so glad Jeff asked this question, because actually very similar thing did happen to me. And I always am amazed that it even happens. So I don't know how long ago it was, maybe 15 years or so. I spent a Christmas up in northern Finland. Got to go and meet Santa, go reindeer sleigh driving and all of those cool wintry things. And it was about midnight one night. And now my memory, it can't tell me if it was either in the Rovaniemi or Kemi train station, so up in northern, like Finnish Lapland. And we were waiting for a train to go further south. And it was dark and it was quite crowded because it was kind of a peak time of year to be there at Christmas, I suppose. And I suddenly saw a girl I went to high school with, Rachel, and I had not seen her since high school. And there was it was quite a few years after high school.
Oh,
but
wow.
there was Rachel Lunt, she.
Do you remember her surname too?
Oh, absolutely. I knew exactly who she was. And she lived around the corner from me when we were in high school. So I knew her really well. Lovely girl. And there she was. And I looked and then she looked at me. I was like, oh my God, we are actually in the same place. And the very frustrating thing was that we were both headed in the same direction, but there were two trains. And so I can't remember. I think mine went first. I'm not sure. But we only got to speak for about 5 minutes before one of us had to go and take our train. But it's such a weird thing, like so random. I know. What are the chances of you both being there in the same train station in northern Finland at the same moment? It was like the weirdest chance thing. But yeah, the world is a small place.
It is. Unbelievably so sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so funny.
And Nuria would like to ask you about that place in the world you've always dreamed to go and you haven't done it yet, and why it is so special for you.
This was a really good question. And a few years ago, I would have absolutely said that was Iceland, because that was a place that I was like weirdly obsessed with for no good reason, other than that when people had told me about it, I just felt like I had to go. But now I've been to Iceland and it lived up to that and more. It was even more amazing than I expected. But I think my next version of that is probably Antarctica. So here I am. I said before,
wow.
I don't like cold weather, but there's something about like those amazing, crazy cold landscapes, like up in that northern Finland trip too. Like it's just amazing, and almost more amazing because, we've grown up in a place where it never even is freezing. It never goes below zero.
Yep.
And so when you then come across, ice and snow and like it's just... like
fascinating.
It's like a completely other world. It's like nothing we can't even understand it.
No.
Like when you breathe in, I remember when I was in northern Finland, and if you breathe in through your nostrils and they feel a bit crunchy, then the guide told me that meant it was like under minus 14 degrees Celsius or something, because that's when you kind of, your breath starts freezing as you breathe in through your nose. So, we never experienced
can't even imagine it.
No, exactly. It's the weirdest sensation. So I think, I don't know, that just kind of that icy landscape, and I don't know, Antarctica just fascinates me. And one of my clients just recently went on another trip down there. She's one of my travel blogging clients, and like it was her third or fourth trip to Antarctica, and made me so envious. So one day I will get down there for sure.
Remember that. We'll ask you next in another 2 years.
Yes, Question. How's my Antarctic plans going? Yep.
All right. Next up we have Amy, and Amy has a few questions too. So how many of your 18 for 2018 have you done? Have you brought new glasses yet? And unrelatedly, because it's a topic not often covered, have you been somewhere you really hated or just didn't get the vibe of?
Right, good. So Amy's first bit is about have I done many things on my list of 18 for 2018. So I'll leave a link in the show notes to that if people are curious about these things that I pledged to do during the year. But to answer Amy's question, I have not got new glasses yet. That was the first thing on my list. But I find it incredibly hard to find glasses that fit well.
Me too.
It's awful. And so I have been putting it off, and I will continue to put it off, but I will get it done before the end of the year because I promised. So that's why it's on the list. But lots of the other things are definitely in progress. So one of them was to record the books that I read in the hope that it will make me read more. And I've been reading so much this year and so much good stuff. So I've got a blog post coming up later on my business blog that has a list of the stuff I've been reading. So I've been doing that. A few other things are kind of travel related. I promised to make a photo book of all our Legoland trips because my son is obsessed with Legoland, but we've got one more Legoland coming up shortly in Japan. So I've got to wait until that's done, and then that book will happen. So Legoland is so cool. Like I'm almost as keen as he is.
You sound like you are. So.
I know. Who would have thought? This is not the way I thought life would go. But the other thing I promised on that list was that I would try a new food every week, because I thought that's kind of a little bit like traveling at home. And I'm not sure, I haven't counted up lately. I kind of keep a record, but I don't know if I'm exactly up to one a week. But I figure I've got a trip to Japan coming up, so I can throw a few new ones in there. But
make up some lost ground.
Exactly. But just today at my local supermarket, they had a fruit I've never tried. I wonder if you know this, Kristy, the achacha fruit. It's
I don't. Actually.
I know, and I haven't tried them yet. I literally just bought them today. They're kind of a weird, well, actually not weird. They're just orange, like smaller than a passion fruit, but yeah, I don't know. And they're originally from Bolivia, but they're now growing them somewhere in Australia. So they were at my supermarket with like a piece of paper you could take away with instructions on what they were and how to eat them. So I thought, well, that's very convenient.
That is. So, only in Perth, were you?
I know, it was so cute. So and of course, when I got to so I put the little bit of paper inside the bag with them. And when I got to the checkout, the girl had to take out the bit of paper to figure out what they were because she didn't know what to ring them up as. So, and I was like, I've already forgotten what they are. That's why I got the bit of paper. So yes, so I haven't tried them yet. I'll report back in the Facebook group about how the achacha taste. I like that kind of thing to, it's like little mini pushing you out of your comfort zone kind of things. And that's like traveling. So that's why that's on the list. So yeah, sorry, that was a long answer to Amy's first questions. Now, the second part was about somewhere I didn't really love. And I pretty much have always enjoyed everywhere I've been, but there's a town in Western Australia that I didn't love at the time. I've heard it's changed since, so apologies in advance to anyone who disagrees with me, but it's probably 20 years ago that I went to Port Hedland and South Hedland. And I was living up in the Pilbara in Newman at the time for a few months, and we'd been around to Karratha and other kind of areas around the Pilbara, and just stopped into Port Hedland for a day. And I don't know, it seemed unsafe and unpleasant. And there was like guys at the supermarket, like guards with guns, which is not a thing I ever saw before, certainly not in Australia. And I just didn't like it. And now I have heard that it's changed since, and it probably has a lot because there's been a big mining boom since then. So that's the only place that springs to mind, and I apologise to everyone in Port Hedland.
I find that funny. Out of everywhere you've been in the world, you choose someone in your home state.
I know. And I really should go up there again so that I can like decide that actually it's really fine.
Yes,
I'm sure
you should.
I'm sure it is. Yeah.
And next up we have Reva, and she'd like to know, is there anywhere in the world you don't want to visit? Like somewhere that has never appealed to you and never will, no matter what people say?
Well, the short answer to that is no, but so I think I am swayed by people. So what springs to mind is that I've never been particularly interested in visiting India, and lots of people just rave and rave and rave about India and go back multiple times, and it just doesn't appeal to me. However, I mentioned before that I do want to take my son to see the Taj Mahal. So I think I will get to India, at least for that. And lots of people say, oh, I felt the same before I went to India, but once I got there, I completely changed my mind and I love it, etc. So I'm open to trying it, but I wouldn't say that I'm exactly excited about visiting it. And apart from that, that's the only place that I sort of have that kind of feeling for. And everywhere else as long as it's, safe enough, I'm not going to go traipsing into a war zone, but otherwise I'm kind of interested in going anywhere. So, if someone picked me up and said, let's go on a trip to, I don't know, somewhere, Zambia or something. I don't know, somewhere I don't know much about. I'm grasping at straws there, but I would go. I don't mind. I'm open to finding out what's there.
You make the best of where you are. So.
Yeah, exactly. Because I'm not the kind of traveller who needs a resort pool and cocktails. I mean, I like cocktails, but I don't need to, I like to go out and see how the local people live and what's happening there. I don't necessarily want, luxury or relaxation.
Yeah, yep. Great. Well, next up, I like this question, is from Joanna. How do you put together a budget for your adventures? Maybe there is some Wizarding World app I don't know about which would help me plan a budget for a week in England or Germany next year. Any suggestions?
I'm sorry to hear that you like this question, Kristy, because I'm going to really disappoint you with my answer because I'm so bad at this. It's terrible. So, I think there are much better people who are good at budgeting for a trip. But basically, I have to travel. Like it's like breathing. So I just do it and then I figure out the money later. But I am a very budget traveller. I've often stayed in hostels and stuff, and I really don't care if a hotel is fancy or not. I just need it to have a bed and, some vague security, safety kind of, that, I don't know, just need to be able to be alive in the morning. Like I really am really, really unfussy about these things. So, but I mean, as an example, I've got this trip to Japan coming up, and before I want to say before I booked it, I checked this, but I'm not 100% sure because I used frequent flyer points for the flights, which is something I often do. I always try and find ways to get as many frequent flyer points as I can. But I had the notion that Airbnb accommodation had got maybe was always really affordable in Japan compared to, how I imagined accommodation to be. When I lived there, it was, extraordinarily high rent. And I knew for the trip that I didn't want to travel very far, that I wanted to mostly base us around Osaka and not, I wouldn't need, $2,000 worth of train passes for us or anything like that. So I kind of look up the big ticket items and figure out, can I find a way to afford this? And then I just go. So, sorry, Joanna, that I cannot give you an amazing app to help you plan your budget. But hopefully there are other places on the internet that have a better answer than me.
Or a good spreadsheet or something.
Well, yes, actually they should be asking you, Kristy.
Yeah, maybe I can whip up a travel spreadsheet.
Yeah, exactly. You're my spreadsheet guru.
And next we have Lena, and she'd like to know, are you planning to live abroad again? And Kati has added, and where would you live besides the countries you've already lived in for an extended period of time and obviously loved?
Right. So definitely, yes, I would love to live abroad again. I'm sure, fairly sure that I will. As I have mentioned, I've got, my 10 years here while my son's at school. And I'm trying to make it clear to him that a gap year between high school and university is obligatory. So I just told him that's what people do. I mean, at some stage he'll figure out that not everyone does that, but I'm just telling him that's what you do.
Great.
Yeah. And so then I'd like to think that, and he always says, that's okay, I'll do that, but you have to come with me. I'm like, okay, yes, let's go. I mean, maybe when he's in 10 years' time, he might not want me to. But, Yeah, I definitely would love to live abroad again. I mean, my work is such that I don't always have to be in Perth for it, so I can, I'm pretty flexible about that. And that, is a big bonus to, it makes it much easier to live abroad because I can work online for a lot of the stuff I do. And where would I live is such a good question. I would probably live pretty much anywhere, but if I had to choose a few places, then I think, lots of different parts of Europe appeal to me for different reasons. I would love to have a longer time in Iceland or in Scandinavia. They're really fascinating places to me. Or more time around the Mediterranean somewhere, kind of a seaside town somewhere.
Sounds nice.
Yes, exactly. And I would love to live. So, I've lived in Japan, and Kati seems to suggest that I'm not supposed to answer places I've already lived. So I would live in Japan again, but I'm, not including that in the list. But also like South Korea or Taiwan, they fascinate me the same way as like they're sort of in some ways similar to Japan. I don't know. I've spent like only a week or 2 weeks in both of those. So it was a pretty quick judgment call, but I'm sure I would enjoy living there. And Canada. So I think Canada is like Australia, but cold.
Perfect.
Well, the people are like kind of really similar mindset and stuff, and it's amazing landscape. So I think I would love to spend a really extended time there and have the chance to really explore it. And I'm sure I'd enjoy it. And sometimes it's nice to live somewhere where you do speak the language.
Yes, it's handy.
Yeah.
All right, and Carly also wants to know, why did you start a travel podcast and how did you come up with the idea of thoughtful travel and to interview different guests each week and pull it together into a topic? It's another good question.
It is a very good question. Cardi is full of good questions, and it made me think about it because, obviously before I started this podcast, I thought about it for a long time, but now it's just a habit. It's something I do.
Yes.
So, it's funny, isn't it? Like so I had to really think hard about it. But why did I start a podcast? Mostly because I love listening to podcasts about all kinds of things, and the kind of travel podcast I wanted to listen to didn't really exist. And so I thought, well, I will just make it then. And that kind of ties into the second part of Cardi's question about what, the idea of thoughtful travel, because, I don't always love listening to travel podcasts that are more destination specific. Like if I'm going somewhere, then I will listen to a podcast episode about that. But otherwise, I don't know, they don't grab me the same way that talking like more broadly does, I suppose. So I wanted there to be, I wanted to be able to talk about, and I also love going on and on about the benefits of travel and why everyone should travel and, travel will save the world, etc. So I just wanted to be able to say that over and over again. But, so why not make a podcast about it? So
exactly, and people love it. So
thank you. Well, it is a lot of fun, and lots of people say the same thing as me when I interview them. They're like, "Yes, travel will change the world. Everyone should travel," and I'm like, "I love you. You're exactly right." So that's been part of it. And the idea of having the different guests each week and making a topic partly came about because, sometimes if you listen to a podcast and they have one guest a week, but sometimes you just don't gel with that guest and then you just don't listen to that episode. And I didn't really want that to happen to my podcast. So I thought, why not make life much more complicated for myself and feature 2 or 3 guests every week? So, I guess in the beginning, if I had known the amount of work involved with that, like especially in the early days, I probably would have tried to make myself be more sensible and not do it. But now that I've been doing it for a couple of years, it's much easier. And, I've always got lots of it's the juggling of the topics and thinking, okay, Kristy spoke about that and Matt spoke about that and I can put this together with that. Like it's actually really, really fun. It's like a game and it's really exciting when you kind of put the jigsaw all together. And it's got much, much easier over the years. So I guess, that's why I do it the way I do it.
And I think it works. So very good.
Thank you. I have so much fun doing it, so I can't stop.
Don't stop. Keep going.
I will, I promise.
But we're going to stop because now we have our final question, which is also from Carty. Do you have any thoughts on being a privileged traveller? Half the world is busy just surviving whilst many of us have the incredible luxury and privilege to explore the world, whether it's budget or not, or whether it's short trips or longer. How do you feel about that? Is this something you think about?
This is a brilliant question, Cardi, and yes, I absolutely think about this a lot because it's not really very fair that I happen to have been born in Australia and I happen to be, to be honest, I happen to be a white person and English speaking, and that makes this a whole lot easier in so many ways. I mean, even just being English speaking, when we go to other countries, so many people have made the effort to learn our language, and that's so unfair. Why should they have to learn English? English is not that easy. Yeah, English is not that easy to learn. So, I mean, there's that for a start. I remember I wrote a blog post years ago. I have to dig it up, but about the privilege of our passport, with an Australian passport and similar, like with an EU passport or an American passport. There's so many places we can go either without a visa or with a, really simple to get visa. And then there's all these places where, you just happen to be born to that other passport, and it's really, really, really difficult to be able to travel to lots of different countries. And that's, through no fault of that passport holders. It's just how it is. And I feel it's not right. And I'm extraordinarily lucky to be in that position. And I didn't do anything to be born with an Australian passport. I just was born and here I am. So it does bother me a lot, but it's not going to stop me traveling. And I kind of try and justify it to myself. I think when we travel and we meet other people from various countries, we learn so much from them, and hopefully they also learn a lot from us. But I feel like if I can inspire other people to travel in this kind of way where in a kind of a real way where you get to meet other people and interact with people from various countries, not just that kind of super tourist, surface level travel, but, real travel, then I think if we as privileged travellers get to know more and more people in less privileged positions, I suppose, then we're more inclined to help them out of those situations, or to, I don't know, it sounds very airy-fairy, but to, slowly change the world.
Yeah, you can have an impact through thoughtful travel.
Yes, yeah, exactly. So, yes, I do think about it a lot, and I try and use my privileged position for good, not evil.
Very well answered, I think.
Thank you. It's a really big question, and it does bother me a lot. And sometimes I think I just don't want to think about it because it's just not fair. But it is important to think about. So, Cardi, thank you so much for that question. Very good.
That's excellent. Right, well, thank you very much, Amanda, for having me to interview you.
Oh, thank you, Kristy. I wanted you to come back on because you were one of my very first guests. And in fact, when I started up the podcast, you probably remember, I was like, I have to figure out how to interview someone. Will you be my guest?
yes,
and you were my guinea pig guest, and you spoke so well, and you were in my very first episode. So thank you very much for agreeing to chat with me and interview me today.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're so
welcome.
It's an honour. Thank you.
Thank you.
So that's my chat with Kristy and all those questions from the Facebook group. Thanks so much. It was just so much fun to answer that great variety of questions. I hope you found it interesting too. Big thank you to Kristy for interviewing me. If you have any WordPress issues, that's Kristy's big specialty. And especially if you're in Perth, she's a fabulous person to get to know. You can see her website at kristymorton.com. I'm going to leave some links in the show notes to some of the some blog posts I referred to and some of the things we talked about. So I did talk about my love for green tea, and I've got a blog post on Not a Ballerina about how I really, really do love green tea, because someone asked me, do you just drink it because it's healthy, or do you actually like it? Like with that tone of voice, like how could anyone like it? So I've got a blog post about that. And we also talked about my list of 18 things I'm going to do in 2018, which is actually over on my amandakendle.com business site, but I've left a link for that in the show notes. And that last question that Kati asked about privilege, I think it's such an important thing. I'd like to talk about that some more in the future, so I might get some guests on to discuss that very issue. But a few years back, well, actually, I think 6 years back, looking at the link, I wrote a short post about some of my thoughts on privilege, and I'll leave a link to that. But it was inspired by an Egyptian travel blogger, Mina, who had written a very interesting post titled, "No, Not Everyone Can Travel, a Bubble Burster." And it's also about 6 years old, that post, but I found it's still live, and I'll leave a link to that in the show notes too, because it's very sobering. People like me have it easy. You know, we have the money. We can get the visas easily. For many places, we don't even need a visa. Everything about it is so simple. And yet we still, try and make it complicated for ourselves sometimes. But we're very lucky to be born with the passports that we're born with. So, yeah, that's a really interesting topic. I think we need to explore that further. So don't forget, come over to our Facebook group, Thoughtful Travellers on Facebook, and have a chat with us about all of these things. You can also catch me on Twitter at Amanda Kendle. You can use the hashtag ThoughtfulTravelPod. Thank you so much for listening to this 2-year anniversary episode. If you are one of my very favourite listeners who's been listening since pretty much the beginning, then a huge thank you. But even if this is your first episode, then I'm still very grateful for you spending the time to have me in your ears nattering on about travel. It's something I love doing, and I really love sharing it. Now, I'm going to have a 1-week break from the podcast over Easter. It's really not because of Easter, it's because I'll be in Japan for a couple of weeks, and it's crazy to try and get everything done. And I'm going to have a proper holiday in Japan and not work, which is really unusual for me because I do love my work, but my son and I are just going to play and have fun in Japan. So the week after this airs, there'll be no episode for that week, but just that week off, and then I'll be back in the, second week of April, I think. So it was just 1 week break for Easter. Let's think of it that way. Thank you very much for listening. And if you now want to go and leave a review or share the podcast with someone, I would be so grateful. Thank you so much for that. And thank you so much for listening. This has been another episode of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Show notes and other information are at notaballerina.com/podcast. Join me again soon for another chat about why we travel. Bye for now.